The fire truck didn't stop at the burning house. It stopped at the one next door, where nothing was on fire. Where Elijah Brooks stood in his front yard, holding a garden hose, completely stunned. Behind him, smoke curled into the sky. 2 houses down, a backyard shed had gone up in flames. Quick, violent, loud. But that wasn't why the truck screeched to a halt in front of his home. It was because of the call. The call that claimed his yard was a fire hazard. And the person who made that call wasn't a neighbor, wasn't a firefighter. It was the president of the Harmony Falls HOA. 3 hours earlier, Elijah had been trimming vines near the side fence. It was Saturday, hot, dry. The kind of afternoon where the air feels like sandpaper, and you can hear your own sweat. He was meticulous with his yard. Not obsessive, just proud. Native plants, mulch paths, a small vegetable garden tucked near the back gate. He'd even installed a drip system to avoid overwatering during drought restrictions. His yard was sustainable, safe, clean. So when the fire engine pulled up, and the battalion chief jumped out, yelling, "Clear this area. We've had multiple reports of fire risk from this address," Elijah's brain stalled. "You mean my yard? You were flagged for brush overgrowth. Possible open flame exposure. There's no brush. There's no flame. I've got a garden hose." The chief's crew spread out anyway. They ran hoses through his driveway, pointed infrared sensors at his tool shed, scanned the mulch with gloved hands, and then they left, confused, apologetic. One even said, "Honestly, sir, you have the safest yard on the block." Elijah stood in the grass, jaw clenched, heart pounding. His daughter Lena peeked out from behind the screen door. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" He shook his head. "No, baby, someone else is." It started the week before. The Harmony Falls HOA had sent a notice during a public meeting, not in writing, announcing a new fire risk enforcement campaign. The HOA president, Victoria Langley, had stood at the front of the clubhouse, holding a laminated clipboard, and pointing to a poster titled Emergency Prevention Protocols. "With wildfires on the rise, we must act proactively," she said. "That means identifying homes that pose potential hazards." No one asked who was qualified to assess those hazards. No one asked what potential meant. The board voted to give themselves temporary authority to issue visual compliance orders. No official inspections, no permits, just eyeballs and power. Elijah had attended that meeting. He had questions. He raised his hand. "Are we working with the fire department?" "We are reviewing that internally," Victoria replied. "Are these orders legally enforceable?" "We're prioritizing community safety, Mr. Brooks." "That's not an answer." Victoria smiled, thin, tight-lipped. "Some of us are more concerned with solutions than with technicalities." He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't interrupted. He just didn't accept her authority at face value. And that was all it took. A few days later, he noticed unfamiliar faces walking slowly past his fence. Not neighbors, not residents, clipboard people. One even took a photo of his compost barrel from the sidewalk. Another pointed at a rosemary bush like it was a lit fuse. Then came the clubhouse gossip. "I heard he's hoarding gas tanks. Someone said he burns leaves behind the shed. That backyard is just asking for a spark." Elijah tried to ignore it, until the fire truck came, until the battalion chief stood on his lawn, visibly annoyed, and said, "Next time someone cries wolf, they'll be the ones facing the fine." That night, Elijah didn't sleep. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew what this was. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't about fire risk. It was about punishment. A subtle, performative, reputation-wrecking punishment from an HOA board that didn't like to be challenged, especially not by someone who knew the bylaws better than they did. Victoria Langley wasn't enforcing policy. She was making an example. But what she didn't know was that Elijah had a cousin who worked in city fire code enforcement. And by the time the sun rose Sunday morning, he'd already made a phone call of his own. Elijah Brooks knew 2 things about bureaucracy. First, it moves slow. Second, if you feed it facts, eventually it bites. He spent Sunday morning in work gloves, not gardening, but gathering. Not photos for social media, not rants, not posts in the HOA group. Proof. He took 56 high-resolution images of his yard from every angle. Mulch depth under 3 inches. Vegetation clearance 5 feet from all structures. No dry brush. No open flames. No propane tanks. The compost bin, enclosed, compliant, and cold to the touch. Then he went to his shed. Inside was a locked filing cabinet. 3rd drawer down, red folder, Harmony Falls HOA bylaws. Signed, ratified and amended since 2015. He downloaded every single update, annotated them in blue pen, There was no clause granting the HOA power to determine or enforce fire hazard violations. None. The only section that came close was a vague bullet under seasonal landscaping, which required homeowners to maintain curb-facing areas in a manner consistent with visual safety standards. Visual safety, not fire safety. No mention of inspections. No mention of response coordination with local authorities. It was a scare tactic, dressed in high-visibility vests and HOA language. At 11 a.m., Elijah called his cousin, Marlon, Lieutenant Marlon Hayes, Sacramento County Fire Code Division. They hadn't talked in months, didn't need to. Family was family. I had a fire crew in my driveway yesterday, Elijah said. They got a report that my yard was a hazard. What? Marlon replied, already annoyed. Who reported it? Harmony Falls HOA. Claimed I was violating code. You're probably the cleanest house in that whole zip code. Can you send someone out? Official inspection. Real documentation. Done. Give me 2 hours. Marlon didn't send a rookie. He sent Inspector Kim Alvarez. Clipboard, gloves, laser thermometer, digital meter, full compliance gear. She arrived with her badge visible, asked permission to enter the property, explained the process, walked every inch of the yard like it was a forensic scene. 37 minutes later, she had her answer. Your lot is not only clear, it's exemplary. Can you put that in writing? Elijah asked, already drafting the report. She paused. Mind if I ask why you needed this so urgently? Elijah gave her the short version. The fire truck. The HOA. The president with a clipboard and an agenda. Inspector Alvarez raised an eyebrow. HOAs can't enforce fire code. That's our job. They claim they were working with your department. She laughed once, cold and sharp. Then they've got a problem. Pretending to be fire enforcement is impersonation. If they used our name to justify that truck call, we'll be investigating. Elijah handed her a copy of the meeting minutes, recorded audio from the clubhouse session, and a printed screenshot from the HOA group chat, where Victoria Langley wrote, "We've coordinated with local fire to begin flagging non-compliant lots." Alvarez read it twice, then pulled out her phone. "I'm flagging this to Marlon, right now." By Monday morning, a real complaint had been filed with the county's Code Fraud Investigation Unit. Victoria had poked a bear with a borrowed stick, and now it was turning around. Elijah didn't go back to the clubhouse. He didn't need to. Word spread on its own. The neighbor across the street, Tony, saw the official vehicle in Elijah's driveway and asked what was going on. Elijah gave him the facts, nothing more. Tony told his wife. She told her friend. By nightfall, 3 board members had heard the words false authority claim and fire department audit. That's when the emails started flying. Not to Elijah, to each other, inside the HOA board, because someone had to take the fall, and Victoria Langley had always acted solo. Elijah didn't care how they broke apart, he just knew the foundation had cracked. On Wednesday, he got a call from the county fire admin office. "We're filing a cease and desist against Harmony Falls HOA. They're prohibited from using fire enforcement language in any of their materials. We're also recommending a $2,500 citation for impersonating an emergency authority." And the report, Elijah asked, already sent. "You'll have it in writing by noon." He hung up the phone, stepped onto his back porch, and smiled. Just once. At the rosemary bush they said could spark a wildfire. The clubhouse filled up faster than usual. Word had gotten around. Not officially, nothing was posted. But when 3 board members privately told their neighbors to make time for Thursday night's meeting, people listened. By 6:45, every seat was taken, notebooks out, phones charged, eyes sharp. At the front of the room sat the same 5 board members as always, except this time, Victoria Langley didn't wear her usual pastel scarf, and she wasn't smiling. Elijah Brooks sat near the middle, calm and composed, holding a thin manila folder. He hadn't come to grandstand. He'd come to bury the lie. Victoria called the meeting to order. "We'll begin with updates on last week's emergency response and the board's proactive safety campaign." Elijah raised his hand. "Point of order," he said. "Before you speak on fire safety, I'd like to submit official documentation from the Sacramento County Fire Code Division." Victoria hesitated. The room shifted. One board member, Jeffrey Stokes, leaned forward to glance at the folder in Elijah's hand. "This meeting isn't a legal hearing," Victoria said carefully. "We'll take homeowner comments at the end." "This is homeowner business," Elijah replied, "and your campaign misrepresented county authority. That affects all of us." He stood, calm. not dramatic. He walked to the front, placed the folder on the table, and stepped back. Jeffrey opened it first. Inside, a signed inspection report from Inspector Kim Alvarez, stamped, sealed, dated. Conclusion: no hazard present. Yard is fully compliant. Risk level, minimal. Next, a cease and desist letter from Sacramento County Fire Admin Office. Plain language, no fluff. The Harmony Falls HOA is prohibited from claiming collaboration with this agency unless formally approved. No such collaboration exists. The use of our department name to justify visual inspections constitutes impersonation of emergency authority. Violation has resulted in a civil fine, $2,500, issued to the HOA. A whisper rippled through the room. Chairs shifted. Someone let out a low whistle. Victoria's hand trembled as she turned the page. This is taken out of context, she said, trying to regain control. Our intent was to protect the neighborhood. Elijah didn't interrupt. He just tilted his head, waiting. We received multiple verbal complaints about properties, Victoria continued. It would have been irresponsible not to act. Jeffrey finally spoke. You told us the fire department requested our help. You said they asked us to conduct walkbys. Another board member added. That they couldn't spare the manpower. That was an internal assumption, Victoria snapped. Based on the urgency of local conditions. So you lied, Elijah said. Calm, clear. Victoria froze. You fabricated authority. You sent fire trucks to homes under false pretenses. And you exposed this board to legal liability without a single vote. He stepped forward again. You called my yard a fire hazard. You weaponized fear. And now your bluff is public record. No one spoke, so Elijah kept going. I've reviewed the HOA bylaws. Nowhere in our charter does the board have the right to invent safety standards without municipal backing. He looked around the room. Neighbors, board members, a few quiet staffers in the back. This wasn't about fire safety. It was about punishment, about proving a point, about making sure no one asks questions at these meetings ever again. Well, here we are. He nodded once, then sat down. Victoria looked to the other board members, but no one would meet her eyes. It was Jeffrey who finally stood. I'd like to make a motion, he said, voice steady, that we suspend the current visual hazard campaign indefinitely. No further inspections, no patrols, no citations. Another board member nodded, seconded. The vote, 4-1. Victoria's was the lone dissent. But even that felt symbolic, because the next motion came just seconds later. I move we censure President Langley for acting without board approval, misrepresenting a public agency, and exposing this HOA to legal liability. Gasps this time. Victoria's mouth opened, but she said nothing. The vote? 3 in favor, 1 against, 1 abstention. She'd been formally reprimanded, not removed, but publicly stripped of credibility. The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. Because this wasn't just a win for Elijah, it was a turning point for the neighborhood. That night, as the crowd filtered out, 2 neighbors stopped Elijah on the sidewalk. One handed him a beer. The other clapped him on the shoulder. We didn't even know you were planning that, one said. I wasn't, Elijah replied. I was just done pretending. Victoria Langley stopped walking her morning route. For someone who'd marched the sidewalks of Harmony Falls like they were a private runway, clipboard in hand, Bluetooth earpiece in place, that alone was enough to raise eyebrows. The pastel windbreaker was gone. So was the power. After the board's public censure, everything she'd spent years controlling began to unravel. Not in a scandalous blaze, but in small steady humiliations. The monthly newsletter went out without her note at the top. The HOA website removed her bio. 2 of her closest allies on the board stopped replying to her emails. One resigned quietly, citing stress. And the fire marshal wasn't done. The following week, the Sacramento County Fire Code Division sent 2 inspectors, not to Elijah's house this time, but to the HOA clubhouse itself. They arrived with a checklist and authority. They found 3 violations: an outdated emergency exit plan posted in the hallway, blocked electrical panels behind a file cabinet, an expired fire extinguisher in the kitchenette. None of it was catastrophic, but it was enough for the county to issue a second fine, $1,750, and this time, it went straight to the HOA's insurance carrier, triggering a mandatory policy review. The board had to file a statement. Victoria had to sign it. And the irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman who used fake fire safety claims to harass her neighbors had put the community's real safety at risk. Meanwhile, something else was happening in Harmony Falls, something quieter, something better. The fear was fading. Neighbors started trimming their own hedges again, without triple checking their lawn bags. People left their garage doors open on weekends. Backyard fire pits returned, this time with permits properly displayed, just in case. Elijah noticed it most in the small things. A man from 2 blocks over stopped him while he was walking the dog. "You don't know me, but thank you," he said. "They shut down my niece's lemonade stand last year, called it a potential food violation. We didn't know what to do." Another neighbor, an elderly woman in a wide sun hat, waved him over during yard work. "You made it okay to breathe again," she said. "I used to flinch every time someone walked by." The HOA hadn't changed overnight, but the people inside it had. They were watching now, asking questions, attending meetings with notepads instead of nods. Jeffrey Stokes, now acting board president, proposed a full community review of every policy passed in the last 3 years. Elijah was the first to volunteer for the new Governance Transparency Subcommittee. "No fake authority, no fear," Jeffrey said at the next meeting, "and no more rules written to serve one person." Applause. Real this time. Victoria made one final push to regain control. She emailed the board, requesting that her censure be reconsidered, in light of community confusion. She cited decades of service, and good intentions misinterpreted. No one responded. 2 weeks later, she listed her house, cash buyers only, no showings. She was gone by the end of the month. Her patio flag stayed rolled up. Her porch light never came back on, and when the HOA hosted its annual spring block party, the first in 3 years to be held without restrictions, it was held in the cul-de-sac, near Elijah's house. He didn't speak, didn't take credit, but the new board president raised a toast in his direction anyway. "To those who remind us," he said, "that community doesn't mean compliance, it means accountability." Later that night, Elijah sat on his back porch with Lena, asleep on his shoulder, and the sound of laughter echoing from a few yards over. The rosemary bush rustled in the breeze, the one they said could spark a fire. He chuckled softly. If only they'd known. The real fire hadn't started in his yard, it had started in their lives, and this time, they were the ones left standing in the smoke. Elijah Brooks didn't frame the fire department's inspection letter. He folded it once, tucked it in a plastic sleeve, and slid it into a file labeled, "Proof just in case." Not because he planned to use it again, because now, he didn't have to. The yard hadn't changed. Same mulch, same rosemary, same hand-built planter boxes along the west fence, but the way people saw it, that changed completely. Neighbors stopped treating his garden like a curiosity. They started asking for advice. One man asked about the drip system, another about drought-resistant ground cover. Even a teenager from down the street asked if he could help install a compost bin for a school project. Elijah said yes to all of them, because he didn't want to be the guy who won. He wanted to be the reason no one else had to fight the same battle. The HOA sent out its first real community survey, just after Victoria moved out. This time, it didn't ask questions like, "Would you prefer mulch or gravel?" It asked, "Do you feel safe speaking at meetings? Have you ever felt targeted by a policy? What's one thing you wish your HOA understood better?" Elijah answered every question. So did 73 other homeowners. When the results were shared publicly, it was clear, people didn't want more rules, they wanted more trust. The new board listened. The visual hazard campaign was permanently retired, and in its place, they launched something else entirely. Community Skills Week, gardening workshops, composting demos, safety training, with actual fire officials this time. Elijah was asked to teach the Saturday morning session. He brought gloves for everyone. Lena stood in the front row of the workshop, holding a clipboard, and pretending to be the assistant. She corrected him twice, and told him he said sustainable too many times. Afterward, they walked home through the same yard they'd defended together. "You think they'll ever try something like that again?" she asked. Elijah looked around. The yards were still imperfect, but no one was scared to show them anymore. "They might," he said, "but this time, they'll have to go through all of us." Lena grinned. Good luck to them. That night, as the sun dipped behind the trees, and the shadows stretched across his garden beds, Elijah sat on his porch with a glass of water, and the hum of a safer, freer neighborhood in the background. No fire truck, No inspection clipboard, just quiet. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The HOA tried to burn him with lies, but he fought back with the truth. And this time, the fire turned on them.